Season 4 of The Dragon Prince raises more questions than it answers. Even as an ardent defender of Season 4, which has proved surprisingly contentious in this fanbase, I do admit that the season does not resolve a lot of the questions that it raised at its onset, nor does it resolve a lot of the questions left at the end of Season 3. It does a lot to set up more tensions and more conflicts for later in the show. Viren, Claudia, Erebos, and the like do have fascinating and compelling stories in this season, but these stories are, fairly or not, likely going to be examined in retrospect based on how the show finishes them in later seasons. Season 4 has to deal with a lot of fallout, not just from the end of Season 3, but from the decision to have this 2-year time skip, which inevitably necessitates a lot of readjustment, a lot of the show reflecting on where these characters are now and what has happened to them in the last 2 years. And there is also a level of readjustment that comes from the fact that Rayla left Callum in Through the Moon. And when she returned, she and Callum have a lot of difficult personal conflicts to work through. Even if I believe the show does a very astute and intimate job of conveying the nuances of those conflicts between Rayla and Callum, how they've grown apart due to Rayla's hasty choices, and how they have a lot of work to do to repair their relationship, it is true that there is not a lot of forward motion in this season. Now, if I'm being perfectly honest, that's true for a lot of seasons in The Dragon Prince. Season 1, and even Season 2 to a certain extent, move at a rather glacial pace. Season 3 is more the exception than the rule. But it does mean that where the show goes from Season 4 is going to be quite curious. Season 4 ends with Viren in an ambiguous position. He has recognized that his attempts to gain power and influence to assert his will have backfired and proved futile. His cunning, his intellect, his ability to see the less savory and idealistic side of the political and sociological paradigms that he is enmeshed in have caused him to become so obsessed with trying to right what he sees as wrongs in the balance between the humans and the elves. He has devoted himself so purely and obsessively to these grandiose, abstract ideals that he has that it inevitably leaves him wanting. It inevitably leaves him reconsidering the choices that he has made after the narrowness and limitations of his perspectives become clear, after he realizes what that monomaniac obsessive longing to fight for what he believes is the good of the humans at all costs has done to him. How it has destroyed his sense of basic identity and turned him into a possessed, both literally and metaphorically, warrior of vengeance and callous cruelty. He is more humble this season, and he is trying to change, but Claudia has become the obsessive one. She has become entranced by the power that Erebos offers, by the gleaming authority and influence offered by dark magic. And she has also become far more vehemently anti-elf after the devastating consequences of the end of Season 3. She had the option to renounce her wrongdoings, renounce her decision to side with Viren, against the elves and seek a sort of forgiveness, but she doesn't do that. She doesn't go back to her brother. Instead, she isolates herself with Viren apart from the ordinary workings and vicissitudes of human society, of Katalis, of the process of rebuilding and reconciliation. Her bitterness, her resentment, all that is sharpened and heightened by this sense of fundamental isolation, by the sense of fundamental loneliness, by the sense of not really having a clear idea of who she is anymore and what she wants her future to be. So she commits to this warped, distorted path offered by Erebos. So I'm interested to see what becomes of her in Season 5. She is not entirely cold-hearted, considering her willingness to relent when Terry pushes her to be nicer to Rayla, and she ends up giving Rayla the coins containing her parents and Renan. Rayla will likely spend a lot of Season 5 trying to free these people that she loves and cares about so much from the coins, and if she happens to succeed, I hope that we get more scenes of these people interacting with Callum, considering that they are quite ardently elven partisans, and they might not be so happy to see their daughter, or their surrogate daughter in Renan's case, be in an intense romantic relationship with a human. That could be interesting. But to turn back to Claudia, she has fundamentally made a choice that no, she is not that bad. If Season 3, despite demonstrating a few moments of joy and wonderment for Claudia, ends with her vehemently deciding that she is going to stay with Viren and dedicate herself to him regardless of the cost, then Season 4, which demonstrates Claudia in a much more negative light, demonstrating her desperately and vindictively attempting to justify her anti-elven stances to Soren. That season ends with her doing something good, doing something considerate for Rayla, and that matters. Claudia is not doomed, certainly not yet. I must admit I have not figured out what is going to happen with this relationship with Terry. He has an inconsistent stance about her. He does not approve of everything she does, but he doesn't seem to have a problem with her being a dark mage, and he doesn't really seem to have a problem with her being willing to kill that Skywing elf. We know he loves her, but why? How did that happen? I hope we get more information about them in Season 5. But regarding the present, I think it's worth noting that Terry serves a similar function to Soren vis-a-vis Claudia. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying that Claudia secretly harbors intense incestuous longings for her brother. This is not Game of Thrones. What I am saying is that Terry and Soren are roughly analogous figures. They're both extremely dorky. They both have good, kind hearts, but they're both lacking in self-confidence. They have not received support from others, and they're desperately trying to figure out who they really are and what they want for themselves, even if their instincts are, on the whole, usually moral. They also serve as a check on Claudia. Claudia losing Soren seems like it's going to be this unleashing of her vehement, visceral darkness. And to a certain extent that's true, but she also has Terry now pulling her back from that pure depravity, from that sordid willingness to commit the most callous actions in order to fulfill her ambitions. So I'm interested to see what happens with Claudia in Season 5, especially in relation to Viren. I thought Viren was going to end up sacrificing himself this season in order to prevent Erebos from coming back, turning against the now distorted ambitions of Claudia. I still believe that is going to eventually happen, but it is not going to happen for a while. Right now, Viren is in a transient liminal state. He knows what he does not want. He knows that his obsessive commitment to these narrow and sectarian ideals, even if his cause was, at the beginning, fundamentally moral, or at least understandable, is causing him to neglect any source of compassion or consideration for those around him. It's prevented him from truly enjoying life, truly connecting with the actual physical details of the world in which he lives, instead preferring to live on some plane of ideas and scheming and ambitions. He becomes significantly more Epicurean in Season 4. By that I mean that he recognizes that all of these heroic, grandiose ambitions are inevitably transient, and that placing too much attachment in the fulfillment of these ambitions inevitably leads to dissatisfaction. Instead, contentment should be derived from the mundane, everyday joys and interactions of life. It's derived from the world of experience, from all these strange and wondrous vicissitudes of being in the world, instead of all of these complicated, labyrinthine, grandiose, magniloquent ideals. That's not the same as hedonism in the popular consciousness. That's not the same as simply fulfilling all transient pleasures. Rather, it is acting with a simple acknowledgement that all these pleasures, all ambitions, all attempts to gain some sort of transcendent satisfaction are inevitably transient. They will fade. The self is in a constant state of flux. Everything dies, everything mutates, and eventually returns to nothingness. And out of that fertile nothingness, new ideas and new ambitions arise, only to themselves transform and decay. Viren has not yet reflected on his treatment of Soren, even though his treatment of Terry at least demonstrates that he's willing to be a little more patient than he was back in Season 1. He still has not reckoned with all of the baggage regarding Soren, especially regarding his wife, Soren's mother. There is a lot that Viren has to figure out before his 30 days are up, but I believe that once he does figure all of these strange and disorienting circumstances that he's in, and every unfortunate action that he's done, and these unfortunate ambitions that he's dedicated himself to, once he figures all of that out, he will try to, I believe, make things right with Soren. Try to gain at least a sense of coming to terms with what he did to Soren, and I believe Soren will eventually forgive him, and Viren will sacrifice himself in order to stop the coming of Erebos, whether this sacrifice is successful or not, and turn against his daughter's poisonous ambitions. This would be a fitting conclusion for Viren's story, and I hope, and actually quite believe, based on what we've seen in Season 4, that this is where they're going in the future of the show. But we will have to see. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. I thoroughly enjoyed Season 4, and I hope we don't have to wait years and years for Season 5. Anyway, tune in soon for the next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.